All right, how you doing? Today we are going to do a pretty straightforward lesson on resizing, cropping, and making images the size or resolution that you want specific to the website or whatever you might be creating. All right, the first thing that's really important to make sure you do is always back up. It's important to save it in a format where you can edit it the easiest. So if you always save it in a Photoshop format, and we're just gonna, our project is to make this photo low res. So we'll save that. Now we have a copy. The original is saved somewhere else already. So that's gonna help us to make sure if we mess with this too much that we don't lose our original. So just a little conversation. When we talk about resizing images, why are we going to do that? Well, you want to make sure that you have the ratio that looks best. You really don't want to have images move around too much on a website. Now you're going to have it be responsive so that it stretches and grows or reduces based on the technology or the screen that the user is viewing it on. But other than that, you really don't want to do too much messing around with cropping and stuff live on the website. You want to try and get these things to display the way you want them to originally. And another thing you want to really make sure that you're always trying to do is make your website load and run really fast. So often you're using images that have a really high resolution. The higher the resolution, the larger the image sizes or the file size, the amount of space it'll take up, and the longer it'll take to load. So the rule is if you have really high resolution, it prints very well on a high resolution printer at 300 ppi, pixels per inch. Now, what that means, that's the resolution of it. Pixel dimensions, when you look at dimensions and you have it set up in pixels, it tells you how many little dots wide and how many little dots tall that the image is made up of when we're talking about specific pixels. So if you go PPI, that means pixels per inch, and 300 pixels in an inch. So that's how many little dots are in an amount of space on the image. So at 300 PPI or 300 pixels per inch, it still prints out really well. But you can reduce that to 72 PPI right now, as of now on the internet and websites, and it'll still display really, really well. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this image, and you'll notice under properties, resolution is 300 pixels per inch. So we can go to image and image size, and there's other things that we can do in here, but you can go to image and image size, and right away that will show you the width in pixels, the height in pixels, and the pixels per inch. You can resample automatic. You can do some other things in here that we'll talk about another time. But one of the things you can see is right here, the image size is 1.94 megabytes, and that's the amount of file size that it's going to take up. And if you reduce that to 72 pixels per inch, it was 1.94 megabytes, and now it's only 114.6 kilobytes, which is a huge reduction. And when you do that on all the images on an image-heavy website, it can really increase, and it's one of the main ways to increase the speed at which your website loads is to reduce the file size that your images take up. And you can do that by adjusting the resolution. Like now, it does zoom down, and that changes. It's a very normal thing for it to change the dimensions, and you need to be prepared for that. Relatively easy to undo this and get back to 300 pixels per inch. If you want to reduce the resolution but keep the image larger, it's always best to start with a very, very large image and just reduce the resolution but still have an image that is large enough for you to use on your website. But like this example, if that's not the case, you want to reduce it to 72 pixels per inch, but you don't want it to be that small. What you can do is you can use one of their resample engines in order to preserve the details in the image and allow you to get the size you want, but the smaller file size. So we're going to use bicubic smoother, and we're going to up this to, let's say 480 in this case, and we're still much smaller. We reduced it by 2/3, and right here, and now we have an image that, when zoomed too far in, doesn't look very good, but at that size it still looks very good, and it's much smaller in file size. Rather than just making it smaller on the website, we made the image smaller. Okay. All right. Let's say you just want to make an image smaller. Okay. And how would we do that? Using the tool. In this case, we would want to reduce it, so we're going to use bicubic sharper. And we're going to want to reduce this from 4,000. It's way too big. We're going to want to reduce this. Again, let's just go with 480, see what happens. So we're going to go to 480. We're going to resample it as a reduction. Okay. Keep this. We're going to go bicubic sharpener. We're going to reduce this to a 480 for a certain part of our website that needs a 480 wide image. We're going to hit OK. And now we have a 480 image. Now we have a much smaller image that's going to take much less file size. And so that's how that works. If you want to increase the size of a file, you need to be really careful about doing that, because you are going to have some quality loss there. But one way to prevent that, or help to keep that from happening, when you do that, again, we're going to go 72 here, and just for crazy, we'll go 1980. Another way to do that when you enlarge it is to go to preserve details. There's two options in this version of Photoshop. And what the reduce noise slider does is reduce the amount of visual noise that's been added when you increase the dimensions of a picture, and you get a little bit of that quality loss. And really what you want to do is kind of get a feel for exactly how much you want to adjust this. In this case, I don't see too much of a change, but it still looks pretty good. And we have a much larger image in that lower pixel size, and it, it still really looks really good in this case. There may be times where you're going to want to rotate images. Rotating an image, pretty straightforward. One of the obvious easy ways to do it is to rotate it using the image rotation tool, where it will rotate it for you one way or the other at 90 and 180 degree. All right, what you'll notice is another selection under rotation is arbitrary. Okay, again, pretty obvious when you start using it. That means you can set just any rotation angle that you want to create that effect, or that sort of thing. All right. All right. Another tool that you will use a tremendous amount of times in order to prepare images to be used in web design is the crop tool. So the crop tool can be found over here. If you hold that down, you can also get to slice and select. And when you go to crop tool, this is pretty straightforward at the very beginning. You can resize it manually by just dragging it around. But one of the things that you'll notice right away is a grid tool. And so you can go rule of thirds, golden ratio, look that up, it's a really good rule. You can just do any grid you want and define the grid. There's diagonal grids and triangle if you're looking for a specific kind of angled setup. The golden ratio is also very pleasing to the eye. And the rule of thirds is really good. It really depends on the look that you're going for. But when you use this, you can hit the checkbox, and now you have a smaller version of this image that you can save and use. So, all right. So another way that you can crop, you can drag and you can use the different grids. But another way that you can crop an image is by pulling down this menu, and you can use a ratio so that you can adjust it into a specific ratio that you want, where you can flip it like this. But you can also go down, and there are some preset ratios that are extremely common for images and for web design. So there's some selections here that allow you to get it to the dimensions that you want for certain areas of a website. That's very common, like the main image at the top of a slider or a banner ad, or you know, your header image at the very top where you have your title and things of that nature. So that's pretty handy. The other thing you can use here that's kind of cool is straighten, and you can straighten your image. Let's say for some reason you want that to be straight, and it will adjust the image so that the certain parts of your image are now straight inside of that. Another version of that might be this staircase here. So we can hit straighten, and we'll drag along the bottom edge of the staircase, and it's just a slight angle that it adjusts in order to make everything line up with the very bottom of that staircase. That obviously is going to work for some things a little bit better than others, but you kind of get the idea of what that straighten tool does. So all these functions are going to allow you to set up your images so that they are in the right ratio with a lower file size so that your website loads up faster.